Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality. Shattered Reality. Shattered Reality. Shattered Reality.
Hi, and thanks for listening to us once again here on Shattered Reality. I am Kate Valentine.
And I am Fahrusha, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. We have a very exciting guest, but before we introduce our guest, I wanted to simply mention to everyone that this is a non-commercial podcast. It's free, and we are free of any of Big Brother's interruptions. No one tells us what to say. This is free, clear, independent podcasting. Now, our guest today is Captain Andy Danziger, and before we welcome him, I want to tell you a very brief story about something that happened to me at the playground with my daughter when she was young, and it was in Tompkins Square Park. One of my neighbors was there with his children, 2 children, and I knew him by sight. I didn't really know him, but we were the only parents in the park. I don't know why. It was some form of a holiday, and he was out there with his 2 kids, and I was with my daughter, and they were playing on the slides, and I struck up a conversation with him, and it so happened, I didn't know this before, but the gentleman was an air traffic controller. And he was talking about his job a little bit, and being someone who has seen anomalous things in the sky myself, I decided to ask him, had he ever seen anything? Did the pilots ever talk about a UFO or a UAP or anything of that nature? And he said, well, they all see them. I think they all see them, but then they never talk about them. I said, what? He said, yeah, it's known that they're not allowed to talk about them. It's just bad news. They don't talk about them. So today we have the exciting guest,
Yes,
Captain Andy Danziger, who has been a pilot for
28 years.
Wow, yeah.
And that's an airline pilot.
That's right. And he's flown around our president, Obama, and he's flown with American Airlines, I believe. And it's Captain Andy Danziger. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming on to Shattered Reality.
Because
thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. We're hoping that you do shatter some reality. So I would like to just carry on with what Fahrusha was saying. There does seem to be an unspoken edict that any untoward events such as UFOs or UAPs are just simply brushed under the rug. Is that correct? Is it as much a career killer in aviation as it is in science?
I don't think it is so much anymore as it used to be, but it's because the whole issue of UFOs seems to be so ridiculed by the government and the press. I think pilots are just reluctant to talk about them.
I think it was one of the most effective ways to keep the whole thing quiet. Just that whole ridicule factor was excellent. That really worked.
Yeah, we just don't talk about them. We talk about them to each other from time to time, but talking about them publicly is pretty unusual. We certainly to discuss it with our friends.
Yeah.
So, in a moment we're going to ask you to talk about your sighting, but what we were just speaking of, would you say that I read your article in the Daily News? I read all your articles in the Daily News, I think. But the one about the German wings situation, I'm wondering if they go for further psychological testing on pilots and co-pilots, wouldn't that even make it more taboo to talk about UFOs? Because wouldn't that be a reason for grounding someone if they wanted to be nasty about it?
Well, it's an interesting thought. I never really considered it. I guess it probably depends what the psychologists think.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it should be a taboo subject at all. Considering that almost everybody talks about them privately, and quite a few pilots have actually seen them, and quite a few people just walking on the street have seen them from, over the years, it's not a sign of being crazy.
Well, I agree.
I would think, and if they were going to start doing psychological testing, I don't even know that they would be going there. I think they would be going in areas that the psychologists have already established different testing modalities for, to check to see if somebody was maybe not playing with a full deck.
We do have one question from a listener that found out that you were coming on, and this listener's name is Will. And he had a question for you as a pilot about the Germanwings flight. And it's a kind of not a technical question exactly. After the crash happened, and after the cell phone video apparently was discovered on one of the passengers that most misfortunately passed on, they had some kind of tussle going on, apparently, where they said the captain, who had been perhaps in the restroom and tried to get back into the cockpit, was barred entry by the co-pilot, who said that he crashed the plane, and it is said that the pilot was using a hatchet to try to get back into the cockpit. But Will brings up the question, isn't the hatchet inside the cockpit?
Yeah, that's correct. So there was some misinformation out there. There's no way there was a hatchet outside of the cockpit.
Thank you.
The hatchet, it's inside, mounted up against the back wall.
So I guess he was just using his fist trying to get in, or trying to get through to this guy. It's a sad situation.
Yeah, I guess what we would really, I'm glad that you were able to answer that question so succinctly that our listener Will had. And so now let's move on to your sighting. Whatever you can tell us about it, we would be more than happy to hear and perhaps ask a couple of questions.
Sure. Well, I was flying very early in my career. I started flying commercially, for the airlines in 1988, and this was in April 1989. So I was still a first officer, and I was on a turboprop propeller plane with jet engines. And we were flying from Kansas City to Waterloo, Iowa, and that route is north to northeast, and it was a late evening departure, so it was I probably took off from Kansas City, as best I can remember, a little bit after 8 o'clock at night, maybe even a little later than that. It could have even been 9 o'clock at night. And we're flying up in beautiful visual conditions to Waterloo, about an hour and 10 or hour and 15-minute flight. We reached our cruise altitude of 15,000 feet. And I had just noticed, nothing unusual, but there were a bunch of thin, wispy kind of clouds right at our altitude, which is, like I said, something perfectly normal. The thing that was a little odd and attention-getting, and remember, when you fly, you see a lot of things, and most things are quite explainable. I would say almost everything is quite explainable, and given time, you've seen virtually everything there is to see. But there was a whitish disc, a dim white disc, visible at about our, maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock position. If you look at a clock and you hold it vertically, that's how you figure out where things are when you describe them. So this would be out on the right side, the right front of the cockpit. And it was a full, round, dim, but very noticeable white disc behind the clouds. And sometimes you actually see the moon dimly visible behind the clouds. Only thing is the moon was right there on the left side at about 9 o'clock, and it was a crescent moon. It wasn't even a full moon. So right away, while we're watching this thing, we're looking, trying to explain what it could possibly be to ourselves. And the first thing, of course, you would think is a reflection of the moon on the clouds. Well, not possible, because the moon was a crescent, and this disk was a full disk. So the moon was out of the question. Look, again, we're flying, and again, it's strange, but it's not, while it's unexplainable, I couldn't at this point certainly say, like, oh, this is some kind of a UFO. I didn't know what it was. It just was unusual.
Right.
Looking down from our cruise altitude, we were, I believe, at 15,000 feet. Was trying to see if maybe there was a searchlight coming from a mall or a car dealer. You know, they have those promotions.
Sure.
And, we see those all the time, too, or periodically. And you can actually see the light on the ground shooting up through the sky and hitting a cloud. Mm-hmm. And looked all over. Nothing. Just darkness below us between Kansas City and Waterloo, Iowa. So we're still flying along, and this white disc is there, and the two of us are talking about it, trying to figure out what it might be. And, 35, 40 minutes passes. Those wispy clouds are all still around us. We haven't flown through any, which at the moment never really struck home as being significant. It turned out it was very significant. And we're flying along, watching this thing. Didn't say anything to the passengers. Didn't think to at the time, because we were kind of engrossed in what this was, because it was pretty mysterious. So as we approached within about maybe 40 miles of Waterloo, it was time to begin our descent. We get a little bit busy. I remember I was heads down getting the weather for Waterloo, and the captain was doing his thing. And neither of us were looking at this for a little while. And we got cleared by air traffic control to start our descent. And I just remember when I looked up, it was just, all you heard was just, holy shit. There was this gigantic red ball that was above the clouds. It took up probably half of the window.
Oh, my.
It was huge, huge. Not so bright as to light up the cockpit, but it was clearly illuminating itself. It was just red. And we're just staring at it like, oh my God, what on earth is this thing? And we don't even know what to say. We're dumbfounded, dumbstruck. Don't say anything to the passengers in the back, because we don't even know what to say to each other. We're just staring at this. The initial response, of course, is, are we going to hit it? But it was exactly where that white disc was, but it's above the clouds now. So we're descending slowly. And as we descend, after maybe 30 seconds of this thing being completely above the clouds, it starts descending slowly with us.
Oh, my goodness.
And yes, and as it descends, it starts becoming hidden by the cloud again. So, 3/4 of it is visible, half of it is visible, 1/4 of it is visible. And this is, I swear, it's just like right out of Close Encounters. And I'm sure Spielberg got some of the ideas based upon reading about UFO sightings. He must have. As the entire thing finally disappeared behind the cloud, white lights, hundreds of white lights, just blinking on and off all around us from the clouds.
Oh, my goodness.
And there were so many, it was really illuminating the cloud very clearly from inside as the lights are blinking. And you could see the cloud start separating like a piece of silly putty. And as it's pulling apart, it's getting thinner and thinner in the middle. And it keeps pulling apart. And this is taking place over about a minute or so. And thinner and thinner. And all of a sudden it gets, to like a thread, and it like snaps in the two clouds into two pieces, or the one cloud into two pieces. And the instant it snapped, it was gone. Wow. Every single thing that we saw was gone. The clouds were gone, the blinking lights were gone, the red thing was gone, the white disc was gone. There was not a cloud in the sky.
My goodness.
Nothing.
My goodness.
Oh, it was the most unbelievable experience of my life.
Absolutely surreal.
Oh, yes, surreal. So, we looked at each other like, oh, my God, do we say anything? What do we say? What do we ask? Do we even want to? And we finally decided, the captain said to me, well, just ask air traffic control if he's got any traffic. So I said, okay. So I, keyed the microphone, and I called the approach controller for Waterloo, and I asked if he had, in fact, I still with the center controller from Kansas City, and I asked him if he had any traffic out there. And the guy says, oh, no, nothing at all. And I refined my question. And I say, well, I don't mean this very minute, but did you have anything, 5 minutes ago? Was there anything at all in the sky? No, it's just you. It's a real quiet night. I say, well, even not just 5 minutes ago, maybe for the last 40 minutes, have you had any traffic out at our 1 or 2 o'clock? He says, no, Air Midwest, whatever her flight number was. You're the only plane in my sector. It's a very quiet night. You're all I've had since you took off from Kansas City.
Wow.
And I said, okay, thank you.
Did any of the passengers see anything?
They never said anything if they did.
Huh.
But wait, so now a half a minute or so passes. The controller calls us back, which is really odd, and says, Air Midwest, and I'll just make up the flight number because I don't remember, 5570, those are the kind of numbers we had back then.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to report a UFO? And the two of us looked at each other. I mean, I didn't even know air traffic controllers come on the radio saying this kind of stuff. And we looked at each other, thinking, career day, is this really what we want to do? But, I mean, it was so incredible. How do you just say nothing? So, the captain shook his head, and I said, yes, sir, we would. I says, okay, very, very nonchalantly. Okay, take down this phone number, advise when ready to copy. So I got out, my pen and piece of paper, and I said, okay, and he just read me a phone number. He says, just give him a call when you get on the ground. So we landed in Waterloo, 10 or 15 minutes later, and once we got rid of our passengers and parked the plane for the night, we came in and we gave a call to the number. It was called the National, we didn't know at the time, was answered National UFO Reporting Center. Never heard of them, and at least I hadn't heard of them at the time. I've since heard of them.
Yes.
But so he interviewed first the captain and then me, and the guy made it real clear at the end of the interview. It seemed like real secretive because it was, you're never going to hear from us. You're never going to hear from us again. You're not going to hear, about this sighting or what it may or may not have been. We just collect information. Okay.
And purportedly, they're not government either.
That is correct. That's correct. That's my understanding. So I finally, at the end of the whole interview, he asked a whole bunch of questions, and mostly kind of things that I'm just relaying to you here. And I said, are we crazy? Has anybody ever seen anything like this before? Pilots? And the guy says, oh, you're not crazy at all. This has been reported by pilots countless times, which was the real shock.
Mm. Yes, indeed.
And,
was that Peter Davenport?
We hung up, and that was it. Say it again?
Was that Peter Davenport that you gave the report to, or do you not remember? I have
absolutely no idea who answered the phone.
Yeah, but I think he was running it at that point.
Yeah, or he did take it over for someone. But still, I mean, for air traffic control to be in touch with Newfork was sort of a little unusual, too. I mean, those air traffic controllers, as pilots are, they may see a lot, but they don't speak a lot. And for them to, as you said, and that's an excellent point, go on the air and give you that number, because then that's a public address.
One thinks that maybe somebody else reported it besides your plane to the air traffic controller, and he was...
from the ground, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Might have called there or something. Yeah. What's going on?
That I guess is possible.
Yeah.
Remember, at least from the airplane perspective, he said we were the only airplane in the sky in his sector. So it wouldn't have been another airplane, at least during the period of time that we were up there. But yes, could have maybe been somebody on the ground, and they're already attracted a lot of attention. No idea.
Yeah,
wow,
that's
we were shocked.
That is some sighting, really. How large was that red ball? I mean, let's say Boeing 737, was it that large, or was it maybe like a little Cessna size, or about how big was it?
It's very hard, especially at night with no real depth perception, to say how big it was. I can tell you it wasn't tiny. Right, it wasn't like something that was the size of, a $50 that was sitting, 2 feet from the window. It was clearly something much, much larger and significantly further away than that. But I would only really be making an estimated guess. I would have to say the thing was as big as a large or medium-sized airplane. It didn't have any resemblance to an airplane, but probably as big as a large to medium-sized airplane at, a distance of a mile or something like that.
Wow.
It was very large in the window.
Yeah.
So, it had to be fairly large. And, I've seen, of course, tons of airplanes in the sky. And, for an airplane to start becoming large in the window, it's got to be really close.
Yeah. Right.
So this thing either was ungodly close and as large as a, small or medium-sized airplane, or it was further away and incredibly large. I have no way of knowing, especially at night.
And you say,
the thing generated its own camouflage.
That was the
hiding
clouds.
behind clouds. There were no clouds in Cedar Rapids. In Waterloo. Exactly. There were no clouds in Kansas City. There were no clouds in the sky in between, except what this thing manufactured, although we didn't know it at the time. How could there be clouds all around us and we never fly through them?
That has been reported by other people. I assume by this time you have read a number of UFO reports, etc., and it always seems so unbelievable. I don't mean that I don't believe the people reporting, but it's just as a concept. As a concept, it's hard to get your mind around it, that these things are generating their own camouflage.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they were just
incredible.
Generating.
And the fact that there's so much going on here, it wasn't a simple... I've read sightings like people saw a red orb. Well, I guess this would be called a red orb. But what about the white disc? What about the flashing white lights? What about the smoke screen that it put up that looked like clouds? There's so much more to this.
Right. Now, if they were sucking in heat to keep that red light going and chilling the air around them, that would create a cloud, right?
That would be one way. If you lower the temperature around you to the dew point, then you get clouds.
And then if it's sucked it in enough,
I don't think you would get the thin, wispy clouds that were all around.
And
that just seems a little odd. How could you kind of control? Even if it was itself very cold, then there would be a cloud around it. But why would the clouds extend out? Hundreds or thousands of feet in several different directions from this thing, kind of in a semicircle around it.
Right. Well,
it's just a little bit hard to
really figure
put a finger on what kind of technology could have even made something like that.
Now, you said when you took off, the sky was clear, that there were no reported ceilings or clouds or anything.
You said the view was very good. It
was clear visibility, unrestricted, both in Kansas City and in Waterloo. And, there's limited weather reporting stations in between, but the weather in between was forecast great, too.
Yeah,
it was just nothing. And it was just kind of like when we leveled off at altitude, all of a sudden, you're busy climbing up, when you're climbing to altitude, because those little airplanes didn't have an autopilot. This was a 17-passenger Metro liner. And you hand fly the airplane the entire time. And so while you're climbing, especially, you're busier than you are in cruise. Even in cruise, you have to really pay attention to what you're doing, because you're still flying the airplane.
Right.
But
no autopilot.
No autopilot. But all I know is I didn't notice the clouds, those thin, wispy clouds, until after we got to cruise altitude. I don't recall whether there were any at all during the climb out.
And
it was when we leveled off at 15,000 feet and we sort of settled in for the cruise portion of the flight, and now it's time to relax. You look out and say, aren't those clouds nice? They're illuminated by the moon. what little moon there was, but you could see them, and then you see this disk.
But you
and
never
that's
went.
Kind of how that went.
You never went through the clouds. Because
no,
you do have to
weird?
Keep a distance from
like
clouds.
I said, we weren't thinking about it at the time.
Yeah.
But of course, after the fact, that's the weirdest thing of everything.
Yeah, it's
well,
totally.
it's part of the weirdness.
Right. Well, I think
this thing was paralleling us at our speed, and it just kept the clouds moving along with it. I have no idea how it does any of this stuff. I mean, I don't even know what this thing was, other than
so bizarre.
I know what it wasn't.
So totally bizarre. Well, and then after the clouds separated, that blinking light, that was like an energy conversion of some sort. I mean, I don't know. I mean, who knows?
Don't have a clue.
Yeah. Wow.
Don't have a clue. Remember, the lights were blinking before the clouds separated into two.
Okay. And then everything disappeared. Boop, just like
gone in an instant.
Everything. Son of a gun.
Many of our guests have their own idea about where UFOs come from, what they could be, if it's space travel, if it's travel from another dimension, if it's time travelers from our future, or what. Do you have yourself a thesis on this?
My guess has just always been that UFOs come from other planets. Obviously, with incredible technologies, who knows what else is possible? I don't know. But there are trillions and trillions of planets. Mm-hmm. And, more than the grains of sand on the entire face of the Earth.
That's true.
And, so it's certainly, it would be inconceivable to think that there wouldn't be life out there someplace. All forms of life. Life that is as basic as a bacteria and as advanced as things that we can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Way above our wildest imagination, not just in their technology, but just in what their life form has become or is, and everything in between. So, assuming that Einstein is right and you can't travel faster than the speed of light, maybe you're bending time-space around the spacecraft, which is things that are being proposed currently. Even NASA's talking about that now as a way to travel very, very fast. Make Mars in a couple of months. Or I think they were saying in a few days instead of in 18 months. It's just unbelievable. And the further you go, the faster you get. And that's just basics of what we're starting to understand. And, if space is bent, which again, it's way over my head. I'm not a physicist. I'm just a pilot, But if we always learn as kids that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
Right.
And if you take a piece of paper and you put a dot on one end of it and a dot on the other, and you draw a straight line, well, that's the straight line way of going. But if space is actually bent, and you take that paper and you just bend it so that, or almost like a fold, and you take those 2 points that were on opposite sides of the paper and you bring them to, a half an inch of each other because of the way you folded the paper. If space is really bent, it may be there's a way to navigate through space and go through those bends, and places that seem far away going in one direction are actually right around the corner going through the proper bends.
Indeed.
Yeah, but we don't know how to find them or obviously go through them.
Our technology hasn't quite gone that far, and who knows
definitely not.
If black holes might not be some of these warp places. But getting back to the UAPs, the UFOs, and other pilots, you've spoken, I'm sure, over the years since 1989 to a number of other pilots. Have you heard any stories that were similar to yours, or anything that was worthy of mention here?
I have spoken to pilots who have seen UFOs that were not in flight. I've seen pilots that have seen lights that were not spectacular, but they saw things that they believed were UFOs flying across the Atlantic. you're typically up, 33 to 40,000 feet, and they look below them, and they see lights that they think are very mysterious. I didn't see them. I don't know what they were. Like I said, most things that you see can be explained.
You said not in flight? Not in flight, not on the ground. They didn't see UFOs.
Well, some of the guys have seen stuff that was on when they were on the ground. I remember one guy, a pilot I was with. Like I said, we don't talk about it a lot, but the people that it was close to, we would bring it up. And I remember one guy was on a houseboat down in the Amazon, and he said this thing came right up above their boat, right up above, and it just was clearly a UFO. I don't remember all the details anymore, but he's quite adamant about what he saw. It had a light that kind of came out of it and shined down on them. Their whole family was on a houseboat. Pretty incredible.
Yes, very much.
But,
like famous sightings in in the Amazon, in Brazil, the island of Colores had a huge UFO sighting there that people were actually injured by radiation. There was about, I'm going to say 50, 60 natives of the island of Colores who, basically a fishing island, and they were out doing some night fishing or getting ready to do some fishing, and a UFO came over, and as it turned out, they were irradiated, and some of them died, I believe. So that's dangerous business.
Anyway, amazing.
Just for a quick break, you are listening to Shattered Reality with Fahrusha and Kate Valentine, and we're speaking to Andrew Danziger. Andrew is a 28-year airline veteran. He has experience in both turboprops and Boeing aircraft. He is has been flying internationally on the 757, 767s as a captain. For the last 14 years, he's served as an airline ground school instructor and check pilot in both simulators and aircraft, and was one of the pilots to fly our present president during his 2008 presidential campaign. Those are excellent credentials, and it just verifies that you're a person who should be taken seriously and not some silly guy. I feel sorry that you see things like this, and many other people see things like this, and they can't be given frontline news in this country, unlike many other countries.
Well, thank goodness the Daily News gives him a platform. Yes,
yeah, props to the news.
There was a sighting and a photograph of a purported UFO in the Bronx about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I read about it.
Yeah,
did you take a look at that photograph?
I did. It was a little, again, as typical of many of these photographs, it was not terribly clear and a little bit difficult to say what it was, which doesn't mean it wasn't real. It just means that, that absolute picture that everybody wants, that everybody knows is 100% real, that they're pretty hard to come by. Yeah. And I would say that picture was a little bit vague and not 100% convincing, but not meaning that it was not what the people may have claimed it was. It just wasn't clear enough that I would able to say that, 100% this is something unbelievable, Well, I don't know what it was.
Don't forget, our pictures basically are based on photons, and as you said, these have energy fields, and who knows what they're shooting out, and that may be why you can't get clear pictures of these things. But aside from that, and I think you'll agree with me on this, when people have sightings, regardless of where or when or whatever, there's an instant feeling that this is not from this earth. I mean, didn't you get that feeling when you saw this thing?
Okay, say that one more time, because your volume is very, very low. So
I'm sorry.
Hard to hear you.
Okay. When you see these things, such as that red ball, and other people who report sightings like this, the feeling is instantly that this is something way out of the ordinary. It's probably not from this planet, and it's something you don't forget. I'm sure you've had other experiences in your career that have been explainable but pretty frightening or harrowing. Maybe you've had some close misses, but you tend to forget those things. You shove them in the back of your mind. But something like this huge red ball that you cannot explain, that then has cloud as a camouflage, that cloud rips apart and then it disappears, that stays with you forever, and it leaves a strong feeling. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, of course. And it was close. It was so close. That's why, it's not like just a light in the sky that, it's just a little bit weird.
Right.
I mean, you even get used to seeing the planets and the stars. And if there was a star that was in the wrong spot, you actually kind of recognize that. But, that can be a million different things, comets and meteors. I hadn't noticed that it's meteors go fast, that just shoots through the sky. But, this just sticks with you. I mean, I've actually heard people all chatting on the radio crossing the Atlantic about reporting. They were all talking. There's an air-to-air frequency where the pilots can talk to each other that aren't talking air traffic control. Mm-hmm. Not regular air traffic control over the Atlantic, so don't misunderstand. Right. It's complicated. I won't even explain it here. But there's a place where we can chat with each other, and there was a whole lot of chatter about this one light that was very low on the horizon that was just flashing tons and tons of colors. Wow. And they were everybody was wondering what it was. Well, I could tell you what it was. It was the light of a star that was very close to the horizon that was either setting or rising, I can't remember which. And because it was going through so much of the horizon, the distortion was causing a ton of colors.
Atmospheric.
And it really was. It was really cool. But it was star, and there were a lot of people talking about it that were questioning what the thing was. But, I had no doubt what it was.
You have commented on different things about airline safety and things involving different air disasters, and I was very taken aback by your description of Turkish Airlines. Had I heard it before I went to Istanbul, I think I might have rethought my trip. However, just about one particular airline, Flight 380, the Malaysian Airlines flight that was that a year ago, 2 years ago now?
Not quite a year, but the one that disappeared.
And it just disappeared, and no wreckage was ever found, and there seemed to be a lot of confusion about what direction it went in. I had spoken privately to some people that I know who fly, and they found it hard to believe that nothing was ever found. What's your opinion on that? And, not holding you to anything here, just, as a person who is obviously very knowledgeable about air traffic safety and what might be going on, what do you think? Why do you think that plane disappeared, and why couldn't they find the direction it had actually gone in? Do you have an opinion?
Well, I would say that the people that told you what they told you probably are not experienced ocean-going pilots. Okay. They may fly either privately or just fly domestically. They don't sound terribly experienced because the oceans cover a large chunk of the earth. And this wasn't like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You have to find the haystack first. And they didn't even begin to know where to look. Once you get out more than a couple hundred miles out from shore, and then this depends where you are on the earth. Some third world areas don't even have such good radar like we have here, or on the Canadian Maritimes, or off the coast of the UK. But the max limit is about 200 miles, and you're off radar. There is just absolutely no radar there. And you're doing what's called position reporting to say where you are. And the fact that the plane disappeared just doesn't mean that, it dropped off radar. There's just nothing that strange about it, because when you're flying out over the ocean, you're not in radar contact at all. So if you're not in radar contact and something happens, whether it's on purpose or accidental, they're certainly not going to see you on radar to see where you went. So they tried using some interesting science using the Doppler effect, and that the best way to explain that for those that don't understand it is when like a fire truck or a police car is coming at you and then it passes you, how the sound changes in pitch.
Yeah, it modulates there.
Well, it's exactly the same. It was what they were trying to do with the science. The airplane had a little electronic device on board that they were not paying for. Therefore, it wasn't transmitting any real information, but it was making basically, we describe it as a ping. It just sent out a little tiny signal frequently, but, it wasn't really being monitored because there was no data in the ping, just kind of a handshake signal, I'm here, back to either Boeing or somebody that monitors that for the data. But like I said, there was no data in the signal, so it was just normally ignored. And they used the frequency of the ping to decide whether the plane was traveling toward or away from the antenna.
I see.
So that was how they did that. Now, I'm not saying that's phony science. That's very real science. The question is does it actually work the way they were doing it? Because I had nothing, of course. I have no idea how this was actually done and how accurate it was, the way they did this. But based upon this, they tried to determine that the plane, while it was not in radio contact and out of radar contact, made a turn away from the direction it was supposed to have been going and started flying in a completely different direction.
Right.
Why did it go in that direction? Don't have the foggiest idea. Was it intentional? Was it another rogue pilot that locked the first officer or the captain out and or beat him to death and then turned away and just crashed the airplane? Flew till he flew out of gas? I have absolutely no idea. And, finding that plane, it's going to take, it could be found this afternoon. It may not be found for 1,000 years. It could be found by a diver or some divers doing some deep sea stuff, in 1,000 years from now. Anybody's guess because they don't really know where to look. So the ocean is
huge. So you don't think it was...
And then there's currents, remember. So the thing, even if you think you know where to look, every day it moves.
Yes. And nothing would
debris on the surface. Yeah, debris on the surface. Again, assuming it crashed on the ocean, what debris that would have been on the surface would have sunk within a few days. The lighter debris, like the seats and stuff like that. But not the seats, but the seat cushions, some life preservers that were just, not attached to anything. That would all, eventually sink down. And, who knows? Maybe one of these days some stuff's going to wash ashore in some foreign country, and they're going to identify it as coming from Malaysia 370. But who knows if or when?
You don't believe that it's possible that somebody took it somewhere else to be for another purpose? That maybe one of these pilots or the fellows that were questionable that was sitting in the front row seats there. You don't think anybody picked the plane up and took it elsewhere?
I doubt it.
Okay.
Because it would be identified someplace. It would have to fly over land, and once it flies over land, it's being picked up by somebody's radar. And even if you have your transponder off, that's the radio that talks to the radar, you're still going to show up. And they're going to be tracking it. They're going to be wondering who this is, what is this, and it's just so unlikely. I mean, I heard stories, I read a lot after it happened. Oh, the plane is sitting, no doubt, in Diego Garcia out in the Indian Ocean. Then these people that said that, they really have no clue what they're talking about. I used to fly as a civilian pilot to Diego Garcia all the time.
Oh, really?
They have, it's not scheduled air service, don't misunderstand, but I did a lot of flying while I was at North American. By the way, it was North American, not American, at North American for the U.S. military.
I see.
Under contracts. and we flew to Diego Garcia once every 2 weeks. And we were not the only one. Tons of airlines were flying, not tons is an exaggeration, but there were probably half a dozen airlines that do that kind of work that are flying to Diego Garcia. So they have actually airline service from commercial airlines that are landing there almost every day. You are not going to hide a 777 on this little tiny atoll of an island. There's just no place to put it. I've been there. I've been there myself numerous times.
Well, it's good that you were able to dispel, to some large extent, the rumors surrounding this missing aircraft. And we thank you for that.
Well, the other thing that I was wondering, when this large object that was in your sighting, this large red ball, a lot of people have reported electromagnetic interference. How were your controls at that time? Did you feel that you were constantly in actually, yeah, were you speaking to air traffic control at the time, or were you sort of between?
There was, there had to have been at least a modicum of communication between us and ATSER during this time, but there was, we didn't have much conversation, but there was no static on the radio, there was no nothing. It was just normal. The fuel gauges indicated normally, everything indicated normally.
Yeah, okay. It just that on some of the, the Bermuda Triangle, they report some electromagnetic effects. And then, speaking of that Malaysian flight, I was wondering if perhaps they had been moved, something had happened to their controls and they lost control of the plane. But so really, this thing was almost sort of harmless, this huge red ball that was floating ahead of you. It just... So, did you get any feeling that it was watching you, or?
It had to have been. Okay. There's no question.
Really?
It was observing us.
Really?
What else would it be doing there?
I don't know.
I mean, it paced us for 200 some odd miles.
Oh.
What else would it have been doing?
Interesting.
Do you think it was like caught up in your as you were going through space? Sort of like you sucked it in somehow. I mean, it was sort of like caught behind you, or it couldn't be caught in front of you. That would have been hard.
No, I think it was just, it for whatever reason, was observing us.
Really?
I can't tell you why, but, it I guess saw us in flight, decided it wanted to go have a look, and started looking. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it.
With the kind of technology that you are describing, it would seem probable that it would have detectors of some sort, maybe even to check out the people on board, as life forms or something.
I don't doubt it. I don't know what it could do. The fact that it did everything that I've described is so incredible that I wouldn't begin to venture a guess on what else it might have been able to do, where it came from, how far it had traveled, where it went when it disappeared, where it came from when it first showed up.
Unknown.
No idea.
Unknown.
Unknown. Had it just been in space, had it been flying around in our atmosphere, just checking other things out, I don't know. But it was incredible.
Did you get the feeling that there was an intelligence there, that you were being watched more than just recorded?
I can't say either way. I didn't really think about it. I mean, I wish I knew. It kind of seems like there was an intelligence there, only in that it was able to navigate to our position and not hit us and not let us hit it, and maintain what appeared to be a constant distance from us. So, yeah, it would seem like there was an intelligence there, but I guess something that's that incredible in the first place, that could have all been done by a really fancy computer and autopilot. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, to me, part of the beauty of exploration is that we get to do it, that a human being gets to go. I mean, we got stuff driving around on Mars, but the ultimate goal is for a human being to go to Mars, because that's what we really want to do. And, if other life forms have that same attitude that we do, you explore for a while automatically, with some kind of an autonomous type spacecraft, but eventually the whole purpose is you want to go and see it with your own two eyes.
Absolutely. Okay. So have you volunteered for Buzz Aldrin's adventure?
No, I have not.
We're sort of passing on that one too. But I think you bring up such a, there's a huge controversy as to should you put a person on Mars or should you just send these various exploration type devices? And I have to agree with you. I mean, yeah, you can send all the robots and the drones that you want, but you got to really see it with your own two eyes.
Of course, the ultimate goal is to go there.
Absolutely.
And if you think about it, if we had people on Mars instead of drones on Mars, we would know if there was some kind of past or present life forms on Mars. But, all these guys do, the scientists come up with tests, and they send these testing laboratories up to Mars, and they test things, and you get back these very strange results that are, at the end, inconclusive. Right. Yet a human being could look at it under, say, a microscope and say, oh, look at this little thing wiggling around here. There's something that, I don't know if it's a bacteria or what you would call it, or maybe they would find something even bigger. I have no idea. But,
I'd like to be there when the rover turns around, they see an eyeball looking into the rover. But because really we are the UFOs of Mars, and
without a doubt.
And so the fact that people think that there can't be UFOs here from elsewhere, I think is sort of a little bit not 100% correct.
Have you thought about writing a book with your sighting and perhaps the sightings of other pilots that you have the opportunity to meet?
Yeah, that'd be great if you could.
My daughter actually wants me to do that. And just recently, since I started writing for the Daily News, she has brought up she wants me to do this. So whether or not that ever comes to fruition or not, I'm not certain. But,
It's a good kind of book to write, Andy. May I call you Andy?
Please.
It's a good kind of a book to write because it could be done over the course of time, just collecting these things, and you only have to write one account at a time. And then you can have somebody, a friend, an editor, somebody just jam the thing together, when you've got a bunch of different things written down. It seems like...
That's a good point. That's the way to do that, I guess.
It's not like writing the great American novel, where you have to come up with a plot or anything. You just collect these stories and write them in an expository fashion, and bingo, you've got a wonderful book.
That's very interesting. Never even thought of it that way. That's the way to do that. My friend that saw the light over his houseboat, he would be the first person I would call after I was done putting my stuff down in detail on paper, and then I would go from there.
Yeah. And I think you'd find a number of people who would be, everybody wants to tell somebody about these things that they've seen, and there's no place really other, as you said before, close friends, people you work with, and even they tend to sort of giggle behind your back. But something like a book like that, and you might even have an emergent quality, like out of all that data, it would start to, maybe some real facts, some real solid theories would start to emerge. I would encourage you to do it. I think you're an excellent witness. And,
yes, a trained witness.
Yeah, with a lot of credibility, and I'm sure that since birds of a feather do tend to fly together, I'm sure most of your friends are equally credible, and probably have.
Oh yeah, I think they're all credible. I haven't met too many people that I don't believe when they tell me things.
Yeah.
Well,
but like I say, I've heard a lot of things that could be anything, and that's you don't know. I mean, the mysterious lights. Well, yeah, you're right. They were mysterious lights. I agree 100%. Don't know what they were. Don't know what they weren't.
Yeah.
But they weren't so in your face as to be able to say, "Oh my God, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me."
You've heard about the O'Hare Airport sighting.
Yes, isn't that interesting?
Yes, it really is. It's an amazing story, and apparently people were suggested that they don't talk about it. I'm not saying they were threatened or anything, but it was suggested that the witnesses clam up. Where do you come down on that? Do you have any opinions on that or anything?
Well, it was from the days before UAVs, so we know it wasn't one of them. So who knows what that was? Mm-hmm. But obviously it was something that defied any kind of explanation for the times when it happened.
And punched a hole in the clouds. So the clouds were involved there also.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously,
totally bizarre.
A solid object.
Totally bizarre. Really incredible. Yeah. I wish all those people would really come together, and they need to write their story.
See?
And put it out there.
You could start.
There you are. There you go, Andy. You've got.
We're going
to sign you up. We're going to encourage you. Well,
they can write the story and they can call me and I'll tell them my part of it. The stories need to get out.
It's been really wonderful speaking with you, and being that we're local here in the New York, New Jersey area, and you are also local, we're going to hope that we're able to have you back on again at some time, maybe in the capacity of a technical aviation advisor.
Wow.
What do you think?
Happy to.
We'd love to have you back on.
Okay. Oh, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you so much.
Really, a pleasure. And you take care now.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye now.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Well,
that was a great guest.
He was just wonderful.
That was terrific.
And we're going to have someone else on here today,
all right,
doing an opinion piece for us about the Roswell slides. We haven't really come down on that in any real way, and it's kind of politically charged event. And so we have our friend who is also a technical advisor of ours, Mr. David Biedny, who's going to be on with us in a few minutes. There was one other thing I wanted to discuss with you, Kate. I don't know if you've read a blog piece that I found out there on another site. The UFO Partisan blog was writing about a very interesting correlation between Roswell and the development of using titanium in our craft, our, human-made craft.
Lightweight and strong, right.
And that prior to Roswell, the production of titanium was very, very low. And after Roswell, it jumped like 1,000 times over. And it was after Roswell that titanium began being used in craft that were manufactured on Earth, and that this person posits, and it's just a theory, but it's interesting enough to have caught my eye and have me repeating it. This is the UFO Partisan blog, that they found titanium in the manufacture of these very, very light craft that was apparently found at Roswell. Just wanted to throw that out there to you.
Not to mention the the transistors and other things and cables and touch screens and everything else that they also feel that were back engineered at Roswell. What was that man's name? He worked for isn't that terrible? I'm having a moment here. He wrote the book and then he was so discredited.
Well, I think
retired.
there was a problem there because the person who wrote the book with him was Bill Burns.
Oh, okay.
And Bill Burns apparently pushed him to finish the book prematurely or rush the galleys to...
Unfortunately, he was quite ill, I think.
Rush the galleys to production, and the gentleman did not get to, re-edit his own work. That's the word that I get in any case.
What was his name again? I can't think of it.
It was an Italian fella.
Yeah.
Italian name.
I shouldn't have brought
it up. It's just on the tip
of my tongue. But anyway, it was all about back engineering from the crash. Yes. And he had been affiliated with a general in the Army, and supposedly back engineering contracts were given out to various companies.
It's a theory.
It's a theory.
It's an interesting theory, but there are what I will say for the theory
can't be proven.
What I will say for the theory is simply that there are a lot of ends like a lot of loose ends there that haven't been proven to my mind one way or the other, though people will characterize this gentleman as having lied about it for some reason.
Yeah, that's the part I mean, they may or may not have been back engineered, but I really find it difficult to believe that he lied on knowing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong too, or maybe I have too much faith in humanity. But I do feel that he was pretty honorable.
So hang in there a moment,
okay,
and we're going to get Mr. David Biedny on the line.
Well, could you, in the meantime, could you just tell us what the alien slides are that we're referring to?
Well, as well I remember it, there were 2 slides that were found near Roswell in someone, at least in the southwest, might have been, a couple hundred miles from Roswell, in the southwest, in an estate, in a trunk, and somehow the quote-unquote Roswell Dream Team got their hands on it, but it wasn't really their provenance. And they were going to present these slides to the world at some juncture. And then a Mexican man named Jaime Maussan, who is known in the UFO world, kind of decided to sort of grandstand the situation and charge people money in Mexico City to see the slides, and also if you wanted like a satellite feed, like you could see the thing on television, on cable, and that was more money. And so that's what it's all about, basically.
Okay. And it was sort of like based on the old alien autopsy type thing. It was the slide depicted an alien. We're going to let or supposedly.
Yes. It was. Apparently there were pictures of a being that was proclaimed to be not a human being.
I see.
And they have since been revealed since the Mexico debacle occurred.
Okay, cool. So is David with us yet? Or?
Hello.
Hey, David. Hi. Kate Valentine here, along with Fahrusha, and you are on Shattered Reality.
Hey, David.
Hey, guys.
Great to talk to you again.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And
Kate, you're a little low.
Am I really? Okay.
Yeah, I can barely hear you.
Oh, okay. Does that sound better? No. Okay. Well, I'll let Fahrusha talk to you, and then Bill will probably up the feed on this side.
So, David, we're having you on today to do a little opinion piece about the slides that were promoted by the so-called Roswell Dream Team and turned into a media circus by Jaime Maussan.
Ah, yes.
So, go right ahead.
Go for it.
Well, this is a real, I think it's a really basic kind of a situation. There's been all of this debate and all of this discussion and all of this finger pointing about the supposed Roswell slides, the idea that these things showed some sort of an alien being, that somehow the quote-unquote researchers were behind this scam, and I'm firmly in the belief that it was a complete financial scam. I'll address that in just a moment. They basically promoted a whole series of what are, I guess you'd have to call, lies about this thing, these pair of slides that ultimately, as I've discussed many times in the past in a variety of venues, even if these slides, these 2 slides, had legitimately shown a non-human entity, let's assume for a moment that would have been the case, that there'd be some way to prove that. There'd be no way to tie those entities to anything at Roswell. That was purely conjecture and fabrication. Meanwhile, if we dig down deeper, we discover that the people who were holding these slides, and the problem of this goes back to provenance. The person who came forward with these things, this character Adam Dew, who had clear financial motives for doing this. The guy was working on a documentary about these things called Kodachrome. I think that's the name of the documentary. He basically approaches these quote-unquote researchers, and that's my first problem, the fact that the people who were sort of primary promoters of this hoax, this fraudulent situation. These guys, Kerry and Schmidt, both of whom I've had personal experiences with on the Paracast and my former podcast about these topics, and one-on-one, I knew that both of these guys were basically about as honest as George W. Bush. It's just what they were. These guys already had very, very colored pasts as far as their veracity as quote-unquote researchers. When you then bring up the name Jaime Maussan, someone I've had extensive experience with, a guy who is well known for promoting and specifically making all sorts of money on pushing fraudulent cases and fraudulent evidence, stuff that he knows is nonsense. He was the one who then got involved in putting together this event in Mexico City. By the way, and again, not to, I hate to sort of harp on these humanistic points, but I think it's really important to get our brains around the fact that for many people, their primary interface to these topics are these people who promote themselves as researchers, as scientists, as students of these topics, who really, as it turns out, are nothing more than barkers. They're promoters. They're salesmen. The way they behave is not like researchers. It's like people who are doing commerce, who are doing business. This event in Mexico City, which apparently, based on relatively credible sources, somewhere around 7,000 people showed up to this thing and paid real money to get into this event, an event that was being promoted by Jaime Maussan on his own media network down there as the thing that was going to change the face of humanity, it was going to change the course of history. Meanwhile, somewhere around 7,000 people paid from $65 to a few $100s to sit in the audience. This was beyond the fact that they were charging $20 for streaming of this thing, this 5-hour presentation where they left to reveal these slides to the very end. You know, I did a little bit of basic math, and on the low end, let's say that of the 7,000 people he comped or gave free access to, let's say, 1,000 of them. Let's say he had 1,000 friends and people he wanted to be there. Let's say 5,000 people. 5,000 people actually paid. And let's for a moment average that out. And let's say 5,000 people paid what is probably a low-end average. Let's call it $75 because, again, some of these tickets were a few $100. But 5,000 people at $75 is $375,000.
Sounds good.
That's just the people who walked in the hall. That's not counting the live stream stuff. And we're not talking about an event that took hundreds of thousands of dollars to put together, folks. So you have these people who basically had a clear commercial motive, made a serious amount of money on this. When it's all said and done, I'm sure Jaime Maussan pocketed at the least a couple of $100,000 for what was effectively a day of presentations. You know, we constantly hear that nobody makes money in this field, but if you do any kind of due diligence on Jaime Maussan, you find that he's got this production company in Mexico City where he's got multiple employees. The guy likes to put forward videos out there of his beautiful mansion outside of Mexico City, sitting on I don't know how many acres of pristine property, this beautiful place. He's doing very well for himself. And this is something that anybody who does any kind of due diligence on him realizes. Much less people who put themselves forward as researchers or, and this is my particular pet peeve, the quote-unquote historian associated with this, a guy who has now been spending a week backpedaling trying to claim that this was all in his participation was in the name of academic research, and also brazenly stating that he would not in any way apologize for his participation. What it really does is it makes it clear, certainly, to the average person that no one can be trusted in the realm of ufology. There are now many reasons to have severe, strong distrust of all of these players. And what I find especially disturbing is how the field in many ways tries to approach this topic with enlightened thinking and tries to basically accept these people as flawed human beings that didn't know what they were doing. They made honest mistakes. I'm sorry, it must be the fact that I'm a New Yorker. I see right through this stuff. And these are people who all of the people involved in this have questionable backgrounds, all of them. All of them have questionable histories. This idea that they sat on these high-resolution slides for years and nobody actually could tell what was on the placard, that once they actually released an actual image to analyze to the world, it took a couple of days for a group of researchers to handily debunk this thing as what many of us were saying all along. It was clearly, obviously, even to an untrained eye, it was a mummy. It wasn't an extraterrestrial. And I had heard the quote-unquote historian on a popular, extremely popular, probably the most popular radio show on this topic, a day or two after the event, still talking about how he found the images so compelling. He's not a historian, okay? The guy is a writer. The people who claim to be researchers who were involved in this situation in Mexico City, they're not researchers, they're entertainers. And that's the problem with this field, okay? People make this field into a full-time living, so they have a motivation to basically keep people involved, and that means telling them any narrative they think their audience wants to hear. This is not some kind of a new phenomenon. This is not some weird kind of an exception that happened this one time. We see this situation in the field of ufology again and again and again. And people seem to have no collective memory. They're simply willing to forgive these people any trespasses because they want to believe, like that infamous poster from the old TV show, The X-Files, I want to believe, showing an image of a Billy Meyer model. That's basically where we're at. And to me, it's kind of frustrating, and I get very upset about this because it ensures that anybody who now, for the next year, wants to try to discuss these things in a serious tone will have to now answer to this fiasco. And again, the people who were promoting this fiasco, the people who put it forward, the people who made it happen, they all made out financially. Numbers don't lie. They made real money, and we'll never know how that money was split up.
Follow the money, huh?
Well, every single time. This is something that it becomes so clear when you study any aspect of politics or sociology or history. Follow the money. The money tells you what's going on. It's extremely frustrating to me, and yet again, something I think I said when I was on your show before, ladies, when people don't have their own personal experiences and they're involved with this stuff, one always has to question their motivation. I don't think sane people get involved with these things, with these topics, without having personal experiences. Maybe they're sane and just greedy. In this case, I think that the motivations of the primary players, and again, the historian in this has tried to distance himself from it and try to make believe that, oh, it's all fine, I'm a researcher, and I was innocent in all of this. No, if nothing else, anybody who studies this field understands the notion of guilt by association. And the person who I'm referring to, you've noticed I've not mentioned his name. Anybody who's really interested in these topics can easily find out who all of these players are. None of these people should ever be trusted again. Not that I trusted any of them going into it.
Okay. Now tell us how you really feel, Dave. Okay. Well, it's a good point. And honestly, we just had Andrew Danziger on. He was he's an airline captain of a 737. He saw this object. He's definitely not making any money on it. It's probably been somewhat detrimental to his career. And he just reports what he saw. That's it. He didn't come to any conclusions. And that's what you like, just this collection of data that hopefully one day you'll get enough where the truth emerges from all this stuff. But those slides are, I mean, I took a look at them and I went, no.
A 4-year-old boy. That's what the
well,
that's
whatever.
what the placard said.
It was a 2-year-old.
And let's even say that you're quite right. Let's say for some bizarre reason it was an alien being. Well, okay. So what? I mean, again, it's something that's reported and it doesn't really mean anything in and of itself.
But it was quite human looking as we saw it. I mean, maybe a little misformed, but certainly in the general realm of the human. I want to thank you very much, David, for
you are fun
giving us this opinion piece. We invite anybody to make a rebuttal. We simply invite them to make a rebuttal. I don't think we're going to get any takers. But here we are, Shattered Reality. A free and independent podcast unencumbered by Big Brother.
Mm-hmm.
So far.
Amen.
So far.
Amen. Yes.
David, thank you again so much.
Thanks.
Always a great
Thanks
to
so
talk to
much.
you, really.
Sure, ladies.
Okay. Bye-bye. Oh, well, I guess that sort of wraps it up for today. And next
two
week,
exciting guests.
Yeah, you really. And speaking of following the money, next week we are going to have the expert on that, Miss Ellen Brown, who is quite the economist and has published a book, Web of Debt, in which she explains how large banking cartels can control the world, since money does indeed make the world go round. And she will tell us how that happens and how it is possible to get off the world if you really want to. But Ellen Brown will be with us next week, the author of Web of Debt, among all other books as well.
Okay, so long. This is Fahrusha.
And this is Kate Valentine, wishing you a happy weekend.
Great.
Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality. Shattered Reality.